We have Jay Hansen and Frank Kluesner. Each of you have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. We'll start with you.
I want to thank everybody here in the audience and also in Radio Land. I appreciate it. Hello, I am Sheriff Jay Hansen. I am a Montana native and grew up in Flathead Valley. After graduating from Montana State University with a Bachelor's of Science degree, I moved to the Beaverhead Valley, where my father's family had settled in 1902. I found employment with Beaverhead County Road Department, Williams Speed, and eventually with the Sheriff's Office. I married the former Sue Tash, now the Public Health Director. We have 2 grown children. I also have 2 older brothers with families living here in Beaverhead County. For over 29 years, I've lived in Dillon in the same house, gone to the same church, and have committed to my law enforcement career with the Sheriff's Office to protect my family and my neighbors. My career began in 1984 when I was hired as a deputy sheriff. Since then, I've worked in many different roles and positions within the office of the sheriff. In 1996, I was appointed sergeant deputy, and ultimately in 1999, I was appointed as undersheriff until 2005, when I was appointed the first investigator for Beaverhead County. In 2006, I earned your trust and was elected as your sheriff. I believe that the different roles I performed assisted me with my career, making me a better leader. I believe that born leaders are few and far between, and the typical leaders that I've met or had the fortune to meet have become leaders because they've developed their skills over a significant period of time. I hold every leadership certificate provided by the Montana Law Enforcement Academy. I graduated from the Sheriff's Institute as well as the Executive Command College. Presently, the office employs 5 dispatchers, 5 detention officers, 5 deputies, and 1 chaplain, along with 3 reserve deputies, 1 administrative assistant, and 53 search and rescue members. The Sheriff's Office and its auxiliary officers are dedicated to protecting the public, preserving the peace, reducing the threat and fear of crime, improving the quality of life within our communities, and always placing humanity first. Our commitment to the residents of Beaverhead County is to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. I'd like to thank John and Joanne and the radio station for providing this forum, and I'd like to thank everybody in the audience and everybody listening. I think it's important that you all are informed, and this is a great way to learn about the issues, make an informed vote. My name is Franklin Kluesner II, and I grew up in Lima, Montana, just south of here. Growing up in a small town, it allowed me to learn rural values, some of which were honesty and integrity. And all of the role models that I had in that community, they also taught me about service. And I began my public service in 1988 when I joined the Lima Fire Department. I became an EMT and also served on the ambulance down there, and I'm presently still certified as an EMT in the state. In 1990, I was working for the state in fire management, and I had the opportunity to apply for the pilot pre-service program to enter the Montana Law Enforcement Academy. I went through a rigorous testing and application procedure and was fortunate enough to enter in one of the few spots. In April of 1991, after graduating from the academy, I took employment with the Beaverhead County Sheriff's Department, where I started out at the Dillon office and covered some of the Lima area, and eventually I was stationed in Wisdom. I served as the Wisdom resident deputy there for a few years, and having known Beaverhead County on the south end growing up in Lima, I gained a great knowledge of the people and just the nature of what a remote community that it is out there, and the other communities of Jackson and Polaris and Wise River. Eventually I moved into Dillon when a slot opened there, and I took a position for the Dillon City Police Department in 1999, where I presently work. I'm the senior patrol officer now for the Dillon Police Department, and I also serve in the capacity of the training officer. What I want to take away as I'm running out of time here is that I really value this community, and Beaverhead County is my home. I've been here all my life, and I think it's a privilege to serve the citizens of Beaverhead County and to continue to serve them as I do today. And I look forward to just discussing the issues as we go through this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. First question, Jane, you've already covered this in your introduction, but you may want to expand on it. Maybe tell the folks about your leadership skills.
Well, as I spoke earlier, I think the Montana Law Enforcement Academy provides officers that wish to go on to leadership roles, supervisory roles. They do a good job providing those trainings and education. I chose to take those classes because I knew at some point that I may be called into, as an undersheriff, I needed to be aware of what leadership and supervisory issues were, and so that's why I chose to take those training programs, and believing that at some point I would be asked to take a position when the sheriff was out of town, or if I may, it was one of the sheriffs that went to the FBI Academy for 6 months, and I ended up taking care of the sheriff's office, and it was invaluable education for me. It did help me during that period of time. I think anybody that wants to be in a position of command has to take those classes.
Right?
Well, I agree the importance of training and continuing your education. It does give you a background and a skill that you need to do your job properly. I too, I've attended the Montana Law Enforcement Academy in various disciplines, including leadership and management classes. I presently serve as the president of the Dillon Police Officers Association. In that capacity, I understand budgets from the point of labor. And I can talk about that later, but wages and benefits are the biggest impact that we have, and our human resources within the department are the most important thing that we have out there. I've also broadened my skills as far as emergency medicine. I have a background in fire as well that can provide valuable knowledge and insight to the other public safety entities that we work with within the county. I've continued my training in regards to mental illness. I'm a member of the Montana Crisis Intervention Team as a result of some training that I took in Billings. And I found that very valuable in my course and my scope of my duties as a police officer. I currently do quite a bit of the training for our department. As far as field training, I'm a firearms instructor, the use of force instructor. And in those, you need to stay current on and employ the best practices. You don't want to train people to do the wrong things. I believe in the concept of community policing. And the model that I train under is community-oriented problem-solving policing. And I know that the greatest resource that we have in this county are its residents. Robert Peel, a couple hundred years ago, the London Metropolitan Police Department said that the police are the people and the people are the police. And I truly believe that, because without becoming involved and engaged with the citizens that you protect and serve, that your job is greatly handicapped. You know, when we work a shift in that, we have maybe 4 sets of eyes, 2 sets of eyes that are out there. But when the people become involved, we have 9,000 other sets of eyes out there that help us solve their problems. And I think what further makes me qualified is that I will listen, and that I have a sincere heart to help solve problems, and I'll go about it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank, next question is, how do you, or would you, resolve disputes among your employees?
Is that question you?
Yeah, you're right.
Well, you would need to take the approach of what is within your policy and what are the boundaries that you've set in your department as a leader. The best way to resolve disputes is to get the interested parties to sit down together and see if that you can mediate that and come up with a solution. If that's not working, or if that's not effective, or if somebody doesn't want to, go along with what that solution is, well then you would need to take in effect what's written within your policy and make sure that you act within the policy and grievance procedures. I'm well aware how these things go, representing our officers on the union side, but that's really important that the process is fair. So, as a sheriff, I would make sure that the process is fair and that the boundaries and that the expectations are clear for the employees, and that what constitutes professional behavior is also set as an example by the leadership. And that's how I would resolve it.
Okay.
Could you repeat that?
How do you, how do you resolve disputes among your employees?
Personally, I guess there's different kinds of problems between employees. Personal issues and issues with how people do their work. When it comes down to how our employees do their work, that's an issue that I want to address right away. Whether it's a policy, or whether it's a procedure, or they're simply just not doing their job. Of course, that's a private conversation with me, and we try to resolve those issues by going through the procedures or the policies, and come to some sort of an agreement where the employee understands his job, and then we can move on. If there's personality issues, and it begins to boil over with other employees, that's another issue where I have to take probably both individuals behind the door and discuss what's going on, and move on, and try to get both employees working on the same plane, and being productive in the office.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Next question is, what is your vision for the sheriff's office for the next 4 years?
Well, the vision, I would love to have 2 more deputies, but I know that's not going to happen, and we discussed this last night. My vision is that with our rural, or let's say urban sprawl, the subdivisions that are going up on a daily basis, almost, maybe not so much daily, but monthly. I would love to have the ability to have additional officers, because I see the problem that we see in my vision. I mean, I'm thinking about some of the bad things that can happen with changes in Beaverhead County, and that's that urban sprawl where how are we going to be able to get out to answer all these 911 calls when we've only got 5 deputies 1 in Lima, 1 in Wisdom, and 3 in Dillon. How are we gonna make sure that we're getting out there and answering those 911 calls in a timely fashion? That worries me. That's the bad vision I see. But I also see that we have good people, and community policing is viable. And if my deputies, my detention officers, if we utilize our skills in community policing, we can make a difference in those issues for this sprawl.
Right?
The vision that I have for the next 4 years is to fix some of the issues that have become somewhat institutional, to engage the citizens more, and to give them more ownership and responsibility in helping solve the problems, such as that some of the problems that Jay's just brought up are occurring, such as patrol availability in Lima and such. That's a small community down there that has a rest area, an interstate, and I've spoken to some of the people down there, and it's important that we do have presence in those communities. Some 350,000 people go into that rest area a year. I found that number of community of 200 people astounding to me. Getting involved in the process and finding a solution, that's what I'll do at the level of the sheriff. As the level of services provided, understanding those needs and those challenges and the growth that we are experiencing and the calls for services that increase are really important to get resources and assets out there in order to help and serve the people. There's some things that can be done, such as in dispatch. I mean, we live in a rural community where emergency medical services are quite a ways away. Things as simple as instituting emergency medical dispatch procedures that dispatchers can relay, critical life-saving care to the people that call in on their cell phones now. Something as simple as that can help. I look to take care of some of the things that have been overlooked for far too long in the areas of evidence management. Getting things back to victims and just processing those things that don't have a lot of cost, but as far as the methodology and how you do those things and set up the structure, it can improve your services to the public. And more importantly is just keeping up with technology and answering the needs to all the people that depend on the sheriff's office for all those various services, such as the fire departments and the ambulances, is going to text-to-page services, and calling out those entities and such. I look forward to working with all the different stakeholders in the community and helping solve those problems, because I think that's a skill that I can really bring, is problem solving. Thank you.
Okay, Frank, next question. We'll start with you. What do you see as the 3 major issues, it doesn't have to be 3, but the major issues the sheriff deals with on a daily basis?
One of the big issues that you do is to deal with keeping the peace. As far as a lot of people come to you with issues that may not necessarily be criminal or may disputes in that, and where they look for advice on how to go or how to do with those things. I find that dealing with a problem that's small saves you time in the future when it becomes a large one. So if you can get out in front of things and just communicating well with those people that come in and ask for your assistance is of great importance. To name the top 3, that's hard. There's a lot of different things that you do in law enforcement. I would say public safety and the preservation of life, and just the ability to work well with all the other emergency responding units that are within the county. If something happens out in the county, a deputy sheriff is generally the first one there. I knew that was my experience when I worked as a resident. I could be out on a scene for a long time before any help arrived. And so it's very important that you're able to put people and resources that have experience, that have training and knowledge that can do a lot of good to help in those crises. And I would say that the thing that impacts us most, this community in almost any way are drugs and alcohol, chemical dependency issues. Drug enforcement is always going to be needed. In interaction with people who are using and selling and such, it's vitally important to our community that we set those boundaries and that we curb those things, because in drug use we find that it increases domestic assaults, or for example, having to go to family services and to remove children from a house where the parents are using and that. So within our society, we really need to address that. And I also find that with use of drugs also sometimes co-occurring are mental health issues. So I think that getting out in front of those things, addressing those problems, getting the staff properly trained in order to deal with those things is very important. I'm the only person that's gone through that CIT, that crisis intervention training in mental illness here in our county. It was grant funded, it's available to everybody. That is one thing I would do to do as a training issue to deal with right away. I'd send the officers as soon as I could. That's valuable training that I find on the street that helps us do our job properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
One more time on the
Well,
question.
they wanted to know the three major issues that a sheriff deals with on a daily basis.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. The major issues that a sheriff has to do or deal with on a day-to-day basis is number one, public relations. Number two, personnel issues, and number three, budget. I trust my deputies. I trust my deputies to do the things out there on the road. They trust me to do the job that the sheriff does, and that take care of the budget, personnel issues, and public relations.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next one's for you, Jay. I hope I wrote this one down right. The question was, what is the significance, I would add, if any, of party affiliation in the sheriff's office?
Well, I'm not real keen on parties. I really would like to see the sheriff's office be nonpartisan. I believe it hasn't. There's no politics. There shouldn't be any politics in the sheriff's office. I'm not a politician, but I have to show that am I a Republican, am I a Democrat, or am I independent? I'm a conservative. I believe that we should do something with the committee this year, the study committee, to look at nonpartisan.
Right?
I agree 100%. The sheriff's office is not a partisan position. The sheriff doesn't legislate the laws. He follows them and executes them fairly and even. And one of the reasons why I am the independent candidate. I too am conservative, raised with a very rural conservative values and roots.
Okay. The next question, I'm going to have to try to decipher, I guess. Frank, we'll start with you. It says, what have you done in your years of law enforcement that represents and affects the people in the outlying areas, Lima, Grant, Wisdom, Jackson, Melrose, and Glen? And what can you do to provide adequate services to these areas? So I gather the person is wondering, or maybe intimating, that services aren't getting out to those areas as much as they are locally. I don't know. But you've been a deputy, so maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, I think I'm in the perfect position to kind of contrast what rural Beaverhead County is compared to the city of Dillon and the outlying areas here. Dillon has a police department that runs 24 hours a day, so there are services in that are immediately available to the people here in this valley. And we overlap and we help the county out on quite a bit of their calls when necessary, and they help us out as well. Having this unique perspective here, living in Lima and working out in the Big Hole, I know the challenges that face a county this large. It's 212 miles to drive from Lost Trail Pass to Alaska Basin, and I've actually responded to calls in both places in the same day. It is hard to put and task resources on that. That's why I think it's important to engage the people that are out in that community and talk to them. That's what I found worked when I was a resident deputy, that I spoke with the business owners, the ranchers, the store owners, people recreating, and let them help me do my job better. And that's why I think it's really important that we can provide officers, deputies out in those areas that integrate in with the people, that know the people, they know what's out of place, and they develop those relationships so that the people are out there and that they do help them and that they do provide that service and help those people. And you can only do this with some retention and training when you're putting a new person in all the time, it's tough to know what's out of place and those things. And I think it's really important also for the sheriff and deputies and all that to understand the totality of the whole county as well, because those resident deputies themselves can't be out there 24 hours a day, and the deputies in Dillon as well will have to go out and serve those communities. And the better you know your community, the better you can serve them.
Thank you. Jay?
Well, adequate services is the big topic, and we're not going to be adequate as long as we have the number of deputies that we do have, and I realize that there's nothing we can do about that at this point, but we do have community policing. We do have people who are deputies that get out there, and maybe the residents in Wisdom and Wise River they may not see us, but we're there at some point in their day, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night. But we try to get around to all our communities. I know that the best way to find out what's going on in Jackson is to sit down at the lodge and have a cup of coffee. And I'm going to indicate a man here that went out there with me one day. He's the past Sheriff Harold Forsman. And we went out there to Jackson and we sat down and we had a cup of coffee. And by the time we were done with the first cup, we had people there wanting to know what are you doing here? You know, well, we just thought we'd come down here and visit and see what's going on. Well, that's pretty good. That's pretty nice. And we try to do that everywhere, but again, we just can't make the rounds every day. So, and the rural people understand that. I would like to see that they make a few more phone calls to us instead of taking things in their control. But for the most part, I think rural residents out there need more help, need more law enforcement, and we'll try to get that law enforcement increased as soon as possible. They need help, so thank you.
Okay. Jay, next question is, what is your experience in managing large events and crises? No idea what a large event is.
Well, managing is one thing, but then also leadership. When you're going to go and manage an incident, you got to have your deputies along there with you, and it's kind of a combination of leadership and management. We want to manage the event, but we also want to use our skills in leadership to make sure that we're utilizing our deputies proper to manage or help the sheriff manage that event. And I think everybody should realize that since I was the undersheriff, up until this point, up until 2013, I managed an event called the Rainbow Gathering. Not once, but twice, okay, twice. And I have good deputies, in fact, good reserve deputies that helped me manage that event, and we did a great job. I think we did a great job because nobody got hurt to speak of, and there's a few people that made our jail, but everything was managed well.
Right?
In my career, in my positions, I've been involved in many large-scale events. Not necessarily in an administrative position, but in more of on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground positions and going through those events. My experience in fire, huge wildland fires, I learned very well the incident command system and how those events are managed with sometimes thousands of people working on a crisis. I too have lived through 2 Rainbow events as a Dillon City police officer. Our department just survived another one of Montana's greatest weekends, the Labor Day festivities. I'm going to do that with limited resources. I see it from, I understand the principles as far as management and incident command on down to seeing at how it all works and is employed as you go through those incidents and crises.
Okay, thank you. The last question for both of you, and again, if anybody in the audience has a question, please come on down. We only have 3 left after this, 4 I guess. And this is for you, I'll start with you, Frank. The question was, what is the best way to handle youth offenders? And I'm just assuming the person, you find a youth that maybe has never been in trouble before. Do you immediately arrest them, or what? I guess that's what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Juvenile and youth offenders in Montana, it's dealing with them because of the Montana Youth Court Act. I don't know if people realize that juvenile offenders don't commit crimes. They can be petitioned to go before the district court youth probation officer to answer for, violations or things that they did, unless, of course, the county attorney files to have them tried as adults. So my experience in policing and dealing with youth offenders and crimes is, if it's minor things, the first place to start is with the parents. I like to give the parents ownership in dealing with their children and handling the situation. And of course, dealing with a youth offender, it's always going to depend on what the offense was. What's the nature of the crime? What are there victims? Are there damage or things like that? The whole point is to act in the best interest of the child so that they learn and that they don't do those things again. So anywhere from talking to the child, having a conversation with their parents, all the way up to arrest and placement in a juvenile detention facility, those are all options. But that's why it's really important to have some knowledge and experience and a team approach. Whenever we deal with some of those situations that go beyond stealing candy at King's or something like that to an offense where there are victims in that, we ask and bring others in and involved in the conversation, which includes everybody there, children, parents, probation officers, family services, whatever it may take.
Jay?
Juveniles, it's a whole different world when you're dealing with juveniles. I think there's probably 2 ways to deal with juvenile issues and crimes, and that's address the issue either with the parents or juvenile officer, or we can mitigate the problem right there in the field. In other words, at the playground, if one of the child is acting up, doing something that's wrong, the officer always has that prerogative to take him aside and say, this is what you shouldn't be doing, and we can do it a different way. I think those are the 2 ways that we can deal with with juveniles on a daily basis. Anything further than that goes into district court.
Okay, and we have 4 questions that were addressed to you, Jay. The first one, and I think you answered it, or at least you discussed it in the Dillon I Daily today or yesterday. Please explain the turnover in your department while you've been the sheriff.
Number one, I hire well. I believe that when I hire somebody, I find the best person for the job. Sometimes it tends to that employee has aspirations for other jobs. I can give you an example: detention. I've had multiple hires for detention when two years later they find out that there's an opening in another agency, and their aspirations is actually for law enforcement and not detention, but it's a stepping stone. And most of those employees that we have that have moved up or moved out of the agency have moved up into a position of a highway patrolman, issue fish and game. I mean, I remember one of our deputies that ended up going and working for the fish and game because that's what he wanted to do. So our turnover is high because we don't pay as well as the neighbors, our county neighbors. So we've seen other deputies move to another town or to another county simply because the money's better. So I believe that to answer that question, because I think that's the only reason why somebody would want to leave Beaverhead County, because it's a great place to live, but it's usually more money or another job that is something that he wants to really do, or he or she wants to really do.
Frank, any comments?
I think the fact that Beaverhead County is training officers for other entities is a problem that we need to address. Over three quarters of the budget, about $1.1 million is spent in wages and benefits. And it takes a lot of money to train and send somebody to the academy. And I just think that we need to address that issue. Beaverhead County, I agree with Jay. Beaverhead County, Dillon, it's the greatest place to live on earth. I have a couple kids in the school system here. There's a lot of things that attract me to staying here, and that should attract other people and deputies to staying here. If there's an issue in wage and benefits to be competitive, maybe we need to have that discussion. I think the wages and the benefits are fairly competitive given where Beaverhead County size is in relationship to some of the rest of the counties in Montana. For whatever the reasons, people are leaving, and the citizens of Beaverhead County are not getting that benefit of a trained and experienced sheriff's department. And I think how we can do to address that issue, we need to look into it carefully and find a solution.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Jay, was do your deputies do compliance checks in county bars?
Yes, we do. We haven't recently. I was notified about 2 years ago that there was going to be some grant money that came out from, I think, federal grant money, and I was told for sure that this grant money was designated for compliance checks, and at this point, none of that money has come down here to allow us for those compliance checks. But I did recently, probably back in June, got another email from the state indicating that it's going to happen soon. So that might be next budget year. I don't know. But we have done compliance checks on our own in the past. The difficulty with compliance checks in Beaverhead County is that you can only do one every night. One every night. Because if you do one up at, just say Polaris, the telephone tree goes around and we only get to one chance at that night to do a compliance check. The word gets out and we can't do any more. But we're hoping that we can get some of this grant money when it comes and move on into compliance.
Any comments, Frank?
The City of Dillon Police Department, we do compliance checks, and we found them an effective tool to curb underage drinking. I think they're a good thing to do in that. There are ways around the telephone tree and the doing it once, such as just going in, having the underage person purchase it, and then doing the citation or something later. I understand what Jay's saying there too. Word does get around fast on small things. That in itself is also an effective deterrent, that people know that you are out there, that you're looking, and it just is a reminder. Like when you're driving down the interstate and you see somebody else pull over with the lights on, you drive the speed limit for at least a mile before you speed up. Getting the word out, sometimes even if you don't think that it's being effective, sometimes it is. That's my comment.
Okay. Next question, Jay. Is there a trained officer on your staff to investigate major crime scenes?
On my staff,
Yes.
there's probably a couple deputies that could do major crime scenes. And when you say major crime scenes, I'm assuming you're talking about homicides, something like.
I don't know what the person that sent this in, I assume that's
Well,
probably not a fight.
you know what? It just depends on the type of the crime. But my deputies are very capable, especially when they're under the leadership of myself.
Comment?
I guess I could have a couple comments towards that. Is that in our agency, we investigate numerous major crimes. There are several officers in the agency that are capable and do those regularly. Before leaving the Sheriff's Department, the double homicide evident grant, I was the case officer on that. We did that investigation, the county portion of it. It was very, very adequately and handled those resources. I think that goes back to hiring and retention and training and putting all that value into those human resources, and then when they move on or leave, you lose all that. And doing complex investigations, it does require a level of education and experience. And I think that you couple and you work on all those things together, that's how you can build a department that is effective and can do those types of things.
Okay. And the last question came in this afternoon. Oops, that went away. Came in this afternoon. It was too late for me to type it up, and I just lost it. I can find it. Here we go. The question was this. In a recent newspaper article, 4 Montana law enforcement agencies received a combined amount of $625,000 in federal COPS hiring grant program funding. He lists Butte Soberbo, Law Enforcement Agency, Bighorn County, Havre Police Department, and the City of Missoula Police Department. The question is, did the Beaverhead County Sheriff's Department, or to your knowledge, the Dillon Police Department, apply for any of this federal grant money, and if not, why? And then I guess it says, have they ever? Which I guess means, have you ever applied for a grant?
Is that
That's for you, yes.
Okay. Yes, I have applied for COPS grants, and I've applied 4 times. I learned the hard way that the big dogs get the bone, and Great Falls, Missoula, Havre, Billings, Butte have picked up those COP grants is because they've got a program that they want to start moving into, and I'll give you an example. Great Falls. Great Falls put in for the money based upon a new gang issue that was happening in Great Falls. So they needed more officers to put on this whether it was juvenile gangs or just what. But that's where the money goes, is those type of programs. I did 4 times, and I did not get a response. That's just the way it is, I guess.
Okay. Any comments, Frank?
Filing for grants and that's not something I do in the scope of my duties presently at this time. I do know that the Dillon Police Department in the mid-90s or late 90s had one officer that was hired then on the COPS grant program.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the questions, so each of you have 5 minutes for your summation. And Frank, I'll start with you.
I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us and talk about the issue. I've been preparing for some 26 years, well 23 years in law enforcement to do the duties of the sheriff. I can bring this unique view and experience I have had living throughout the county and being a deputy and being a city police officer, and I understand that our county has a lot of diverse interests and people that live within it. It's not uncommon to have a sale at the Patagonia store, a cowboy poetry reading, a rodeo, and a farmer's market, and some sort of a candlelight vigil all going on at the same time in Dillon. I know the needs of the city of Dillon are different than the needs of the city of Lima or Wisdom or Wise River, and I understand the difference in some of those needs. I've always had a passion to serve. I think that's pretty evident when you look at my background in volunteer work with fire and ambulance. I continue to do that and be part of the community in which I live. I involve myself in youth activities. I just enjoy living and working in Beaverhead County. I bring a broad base of skills to this profession and that I can bring to the office of the sheriff. In regards to budgets and management, the experience that I have on the side of labor, working with budgets in regards to salary and benefits, I believe I can go to the opposite side of the table in management and take that knowledge and keep Beaverhead County's budget running smoothly and not giving any more burden to the taxpayers. I own a modest house and some property south of town here. I pay taxes like anybody else. I have no intention of wanting to pay taxes any more than I do. So that's something that you can take to heart, that I will do everything I can to find the balance of a limited budget and limited resources and still get the services that each and every one of you deserve from the Sheriff's Department. My background and knowledge in other disciplines of emergency service, I think, will allow me to work well with all the entities within the county, the fire departments, the ambulance, the search and rescue, and not in a manner of which to go tell them how to do it, but in a matter of understanding what they do and how I can support their activities so that they too can provide those necessary and important services to all the residents that live here. I know that our community is going to grow and that it is going to change. That's evident. I think about this a lot. I think about the different ways that we can anticipate and get in front of that growth. And I know the best way that we can do this is if we all work together and that we bring people into the conversations. And in regards to public safety, I think it's going to be important for the sheriff to be out in front of some of this too and lead the way. As the new subdivisions are being built, as different things impact this community, some of the things that we overlook here too is as subdivisions are being built, that creates a level of, well, housing that's not desirable for everybody else, which I've seen in my experience. It does attract people from out-of-state interests, and they do bring with them their own set of problems that they were trying to escape from. That then again impacts the communities in which they move into. As we get growth and as we get building within this county, I think that that itself will kind of mitigate the problem of funding, because with more buildings and more growth come more taxing, and so that we can find the balance to provide those services as we need to and grow. I think that serving you as a police officer and as a deputy sheriff in the time that I have, I consider it quite a privilege. I know that I've helped a considerable amount of people, and I find that is a great reward itself. I think it would be an honor for you to elect me as your next sheriff of Beaverhead County, and I would consider it a privilege to serve each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I think what I would like to do is just talk a little bit about the sheriff's office, our accomplishments under my leadership and my experience. We have minimized our liability lawsuits by increasing jail and office security, training and education. We've increased training and education for deputies, especially in the area of responding to active shooter incidences, much like the Sandy Hook Elementary School. And on a side note, I want to say that in light of the incident here earlier this week at the high school, I will be attending the community talk by the retired Columbine principal on Tuesday at 7 p.m. at the high school. And the event is free for those who want to come down. So we've learned more about mental illness. My deputies have had that training to know a little bit about what mental illness is about and how to deal with people. We've established in-house training for detention officers and dispatchers. We've continued our DARE program since 1991. We've done DARE every year since 1991, and we will continue to teach DARE. We've minimized employee turnover. Back in 2005, from May through August, we lost 8 full-time employees that resigned and took jobs elsewhere because of poor administration. And that was from a different sheriff. We've continued to work well with local and state entities such as the Dillon Police Department, Fish, Wildlife and Parks, Montana Highway Patrol, Southwest Montana Drug Task Force, Juvenile and Adult Probation, Emergency Medical Services, Fire Services, University of Montana Western and County Schools, Public Health, Beaverhead DUI Task Force, the Disaster and Emergency Services, Adult and Child Protection Services, Local Emergency Planning Committee. We're keeping the public informed on a weekly basis through all forms of media. We've established a chaplain program to assist my staff mentally, physically, and spiritually, and additionally providing assistance with difficult situations such as family deaths and mental health issues. We've successfully managed rainbow events in 2000 and 2013. We've successfully managed wildfire events in regards to evacuation planning since 2000. Recently, this is something that we just embarked on, 2 major operations this fiscal year. We are looking to update the 911 system by installing new computers and software that allows for better call taking and including up to date paging for fire, EMS, search and rescue, and law enforcement. We're also trying to update the radio communications by moving from the small building up on Mauer Mountain to a larger building that was provided by Interoperability Montana. A building that will provide better backup power system for radios belonging to the sheriff, fire, and search and rescue. And last but not least, and probably more important, is that I have managed the county taxpayers' $1.5 million sheriff budget effectively and efficiently. Thank you, and I would really appreciate the fact that everybody stuck it out here to the very end. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.